In 2006, there was a movie came out that some of us saw, a lot of us probably didn't. I don't think it was a huge blockbuster. It was a movie with Will Smith called The Pursuit of Happiness. Did anybody see that one? It was the one where they misspelled happiness, which bugged me like crazy, but I understood why they did it. It drove me nuts. But in this movie, Will Smith's character is a father who's got a son who he's trying to support, he's trying to love on, trying to show him a good life. And Will Smith's character he's down on his luck. He's trying to sell some sort of medical supply, and he's not having any luck on it. And then he meets a man. Sitting on the side of the road, or actually I should say pulling up in his nice red convertible, and he has a conversation with him about how do I get that? And the man proceeds to walk through this is what I do for a living, this is how I make my money. And Will Smith's character, I can't remember his name in the movie, but Will Smith's character begins to go down that path so that he can provide his son with all of these perfect things in life, all of these riches. And it's a great story. I love it. It's based on a true story. It was good. It was well done. But I really felt watching it like they missed a little bit of what was in that story. Now, they caught some things. They caught the fact that Will Smith's character really seemed to find some happiness when his son looked at him, and even though at this point in the movie they are homeless, they're sleeping in public restrooms and trying to keep the doors shut when people try and come in, when his son looks at him and says, "You're a good papa." You see Will Smith's character begin to break at this point and begin to see this little hint of what brings true happiness in him, that it's not the riches. Now, the story is still about his pursuit of material happiness, while at the same time teaching us that happiness comes from something other than the material world. And happiness comes from something other than riches and other than money and other than comforts and all those things that we search for it in. But here's where I feel like they slipped up just a little bit. And maybe I'm being too critical. But true happiness also doesn't come in hearing good words from other people. Now, they feel good, absolutely. And when we can look at ourselves and our kids tell us, if we have children, that we are a good parent, that brings joy in our lives, absolutely. There's I think a 15-year stage in parenting where you don't hear those words, and so the rare times where you do, it's oh, that feels really good. But we also know that there are people who never hear those words. In the song that I mentioned last week by Dan and Shay called Bigger Houses, they're talking about how happiness isn't found in bigger houses. Happiness is found in who's in that house with you. Happiness is found in the people that are in your life that you love them. But what about the people who don't have those relationships in their life? And they're never going to have those relationships in their life. What about those people who desperately long for the approval of their parents and they're never going to receive it? What about those people who long for a spouse and they're never going to have one? What about those people who long for children and they're never going to have them? Can they still have happiness if happiness is found in who you share your home with? Or is it that perhaps happiness has always been found somewhere else? True happiness has always been found. Now, those things, they make our lives sometimes feel more full, and they give us warm feelings, and they're good things. But what about when we just aren't going to get them? Can we still be full of happiness? Last week, I defined happiness, what I believe is happiness anyway, as being peaceful, as being hopeful, as being joyful, as being full of love, having all of those things flow out of you and into you on a regular basis. And we know that those aren't going to always come from the world around us. So how can we truly feel happiness, peace, hope, love, and joy if those other things aren't going to be there? Well, we tend to search for them in what we refer to as bigger houses. Yes, we are building a house on our platform, and yes, I understand that some of you are going, this is going really slow. But here's the thing, the bigger houses that we build, they don't happen overnight. Those things that we rely upon for our happiness, they don't happen overnight, and so our house isn't being built overnight. The bigger houses that we're talking about are anything, anyone, or any place that we depend on to give us our happiness. And many times we build those out of material possessions. We build those out of relationships that we have with other people. We build those out of things of this world. But about 2,000 years ago, the Word who became flesh moved into our neighborhoods, took up residence among us, and began to show us through his life and through his words where real peace, hope, love, and joy are found. Now, we know that boy, that Word who became flesh and who was born a baby, didn't stay a baby. He grew into a man, and he taught, and he grew into a man who died on a cross and a man who rose from the dead so that we could be free from all of these things that pull us down and all of these things that try and convince us that this is where happiness is found, that we consistently go to and yet don't find what it's promising. It doesn't deliver. And we know this. Deep down inside of us, as we pursue all of these other things, we know that they don't provide it. We've seen it over and over again in the lives of others, and we've seen it over and over again in our own lives, but yet there is always that thought of, but maybe it's the next thing that I buy. Or maybe it's the next relationship that I enter into. Or maybe it's the next 100 likes that I get on a post. Or maybe it's the next, and we keep going, but maybe it's the next, and it's always just a little bit out there. And that's what happens when we put our hope, our happiness, into bigger houses. Here's the thing about bigger houses. As I talk about these and as we continue to talk about these for the next several weeks, bigger houses are not inherently bad things. Not everything about them is bad. Having a roof over your head is not a bad thing. Having food on your table is not a bad thing. Having a cell phone is not a bad thing. Buying your children gifts at Christmas time is not a bad thing. But a good thing becomes a bad thing when it becomes the main thing. When it becomes that thing that we rely on, that we become dependent upon to bring us happiness, when it becomes that thing that has taken the spot of Jesus in our life. You know, we watched a video a little bit ago. Those are guys called the Skit Guys. Back when I was beginning in youth ministry, they were still young and they were still teaching teenagers, and now they teach people my age. So I'm still watching them. I'm still connecting with them. But I love how they captured that there is nothing that's going to replace Jesus. Now, for the record, if you lose the baby Jesus in your nativity scene, you haven't all of a sudden lost Jesus. Let's just make that very clear. If you need to use a blue gummy bear, it's gonna be okay. But I love how he hammered home on that. Like, say that again. Say that again. Nothing can replace Jesus. Sometimes, though, our bigger houses, they become things that we're trying to replace Jesus with. Some of those bigger houses grab a hold of us in ways that others never could. This morning, I want us to look at some of the addictions that we have in our lives. Addictions that we go to over and over again, or that pull us back in, that aren't inherently bad things. But when they gain control over us, they become the bad thing because they have become the main thing. An addiction, according to the dictionary, is the fact or condition of being addicted, which I was always told growing up that you're not supposed to use the word in the definition, but they did it. The fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. So I thought, okay, they're using the word in there. Let's look at what does it say addicted is. Addicted is being physically and mentally dependent upon a particular substance and unable to stop taking it without incurring adverse effects. Here's how I describe an addiction from a spiritual standpoint. An addiction is an idol in our life that has taken control. An idol is a source that is promising us happiness. An idol is a god that is taking the place that only God, capital G, should inhabit in our lives. An addiction, if we're being completely honest, has become a god in our lives. Many times it's become the god in our lives. So what kind of addictions do we struggle with? Now, I know that the go-tos are always drugs and alcohol. And if you're sitting there going, you bought the wrong kind of beer this morning, then maybe you need to double check your addiction level. Just saying. Alcohol in and of itself is not something that Scripture tells us that we are not allowed to drink. In the Church of God, that was taught for a long time. It says, do not get drunk on wine. But Paul also tells Timothy to drink some wine for your stomach. Now, he doesn't say drink beer, because at that point, from what we know, there wasn't this kind of beer going around on the shelves. Alcohol in and of itself isn't the problem. The problem is when it becomes something that we depend upon in our lives. Or what about, let's see what else we have in here. Some fitness. Who laughed? This is the weight that I use, people. Come on. How do you think you get arms like this, huh? Come on. Oh, fitness is a good thing. But can it take control of our lives? Can it become the only thing or the first thing that we think about when we wake up in the morning? Or TV. It's not inherently a bad thing, but can it become something bigger? Can it become the main thing in our life? Absolutely. It's a great way to shut the brain down from reality, to escape all the hard things going on in our lives. TV can actually be, or movies, or anything along those lines that you want to look at. Or what about work? Now, I get it. We got to go to work, right? Stay. But what about when we never actually leave work? Because we take work home with us. And when our kids or our spouses or our parents or whoever are needing us, we're too busy sitting in front of the computer or whatever your work looks like. I realize that for some of us it's like, nope, don't use the computer for work. But when we begin to take it home and we can't not do it, it can become the main thing. And when it becomes the main thing, it becomes a bad thing. What else? I know some of you are looking at it going, dude, that's like an old Xbox controller. How old is this pastor of ours? Yes, this is the Xbox One controller, young people. Not inherently a bad thing, but can it become one? Can it become the first thing that we think about when we wake up in the morning and the last thing we do before we go to bed? And I've been guilty of this, and I'm sure there's other people in this room who are guilty of it too, that when you go to sleep, your mind is actually still playing through the video game, and it's eliminating the people in Fortnite in your mind, and it's building up the stuff in your game as you're trying to sleep. Your mind is still there, and I see some parents looking at their kids and going, are you listening right now? I mean, there might be some my age too that struggle with that. I just confess to it. And I think this might be the biggest one of all in our day and age. I'm not even sure I need to say anything, because I think we know. And that's a true sign of an addiction, when we know and we still can't change it. It's a great sign that a good thing has become the main thing. When we know how unhealthy it is. When we know how much it's taken control of our lives. And we've either gotten to the point of not being able to resist, or just gotten to the point of, I just don't care. And this can represent so many different things. This can represent I can't be around other people for more than 10 minutes without looking at my phone. This can represent I can't stand in a line anymore without looking at my phone. This can be the I can't go more than 5 to 10 minutes without seeing who liked my post or commented on my post or who just posted. This can also become the I can't sit with my kids for more than 10 minutes without giving them a screen to look at. Which means not only is it our addiction, but we're causing it to become our child's addiction. This, I believe, and I get it, I sound old when I say it, and I sound like I belong in the late 1900s, which is where I came from, when I say that I think this might be the most unhealthy addiction that we have in our world. All of it can be good things. And actually, there was one other one that I meant to grab this morning that I forgot to grab, and that would be a coffee pot. But it's caffeine. It's what I use to wake up in the morning. I can't sleep at night because of the 400 milligrams of caffeine I've had throughout the course of my day, and so I need more caffeine in the morning. Man, it's a good thing that can become a bad thing when it becomes, church, the main thing. All of these are bigger houses. They're all things that we can go to that aren't inherently bad things, but can become them. When they take control of our lives, they become those things. When is a good thing a bad thing? When do these things that are good or maybe not good, but just kind of there, they themselves have no power until we give them power. They're just objects. They're just beverages. They're just whatever. When do they become a bad thing? I would say one of those is when we have to have it. A good thing becomes a bad thing when we have to have. Now, I'm not talking about food. We have to have food and we have to have water. Can we still abuse those? And can we still become addicted to those? Absolutely. But there are some things that, yes, we have to have. But I'm talking about the ones that we don't necessarily have to have, but we can't function anymore without them, which I would throw caffeine into the mix for many of us, myself included. I actually, if I'm being completely honest, caffeine doesn't even affect me anymore. I can drink an energy drink sitting on the couch watching football and fall asleep with it in my hand. I've done it. That's when Sarah looked at me and said, "You might have a problem." And I looked at her and I said, "I don't have a problem. You have a problem." It was fantastic. I mean, yeah. Unfortunately, that's actually kind of a true story. But, we wake up in the morning and we've got to immediately go to the coffee pot. We've got to immediately drink our 3 or 4 cups so that we can wake up. Not inherently a bad thing, but what about when God is actually telling us, hey, what I really need you to do is to slow down. It's not more caffeine that you need so that you can push through a little bit more, but what you need is more with me. More time with me. I'm inviting you to come along with me and to lay beside still waters, but you can't do it because you're so hyped up on caffeine that you can't slow down. But I need caffeine so that I can get through my job and raising my kids and all that. But what I'm calling you to do is to rest in my presence. But the world tells, and that's where the problem comes in. The world tells us that we need to go and go and go and go because that's where we're going to find happiness. We'll find happiness when we have more money. We'll find happiness when we get our raise. We'll find happiness when our kids are involved in 1,000 different things and we are at every single one of them. That's when we'll find happiness. But what if God is telling us something different about where happiness is found, and He's actually telling us that it's found when we take the time to stop and to rest? What if the world is wrong? It will only be by a choice that we choose to stop believing the world and to instead believe Jesus. And at that point, we might be able to have caffeine lose its grip on our lives. Again, it's not a bad thing, but it can become one. Or a bad thing becomes a good thing becomes a bad thing when we overuse it. So yeah, it's when we have to have it, but it's also some of those things that they're good, they're okay, or maybe they're just, ambivalent. But when we overuse it, that's when it becomes the bad thing. A drink, I don't see in Scripture where it says that a drink is a sin. But I do see where it says that becoming drunk is. But can a drink, when we only have one a day, still be an addiction? If you're to that point where you have to have it to calm down at night, and I know people like that, I have to have it in order to calm my mind, then perhaps God is calling out to you saying, I've got something better for you. I've got something that will actually calm your mind, that will actually bring peace into your lives. I sent my son so that you could experience that. But the world tells me just a beer a night isn't bad, it's okay. And you know what? I'm not standing up here saying that it's wrong. Until it becomes something that you have to have. And that's when it begins to become the addiction and the idol in our lives. A good thing becomes a bad thing when we find ourselves spending all of our time justifying an unhealthy behavior or ignoring an unhealthy behavior, which I believe is a big one of what comes into this. Because like I said, we've heard the studies. We've read the studies. Most of us have heard that the creators of the social media platforms don't even let their kids use them because of how damaging they are for the children that are on them. We've read the studies about the increased the increased anxiety in our kids' lives. I mean, we sit here and we say kids these days, back in my day, not everyone struggled with depression and stress and anxiety when we were in high school and middle school. Back in your day, your parents weren't posting everything about your life on this. And we justify it. We say, but that's how we stay in contact with people. Yeah, but you're killing your kids. At least that's what the research shows. We had that discussion in our home at one point where we've moved several times. We wanted people from where we've been to be able to see what our kids are doing and see our kids grow up. And Keely requested us to stop posting things of her online. And we tried to justify it. Our daughter came to us and requested that we not put these things on there because she didn't want to live her life online for everybody to see. And as parents, for a while, we ignored her. And while your child may not be asking that, this generation is asking that in the mental behavior and the mental disorders that they are suffering from. And yet we sit there and say, but, and we begin to justify or ignore the problem. Oh, it's not just social media, it's others. But how often have we done it? How often do we sit there and justify or ignore an unhealthy behavior? And a good thing can become a bad thing when we desire it more than we desire Christ. And I could say that about any one of these up here. More than I want to strengthen my spiritual relationship with God, I want to make sure that my body is built strong. And I can justify that because he says my body is a temple, and God, I want your temple to look good. I want your temple to be the kind of temple that other people look at and go, man, I wish I worshiped a God at that temple. A really weird thing to say. Or God, I know that I haven't spent any time with you, but I'm behind on Yellowstone. Like they just finally came out with part 2 of season whatever season they're on. Never mind the language and the nudity and all that stuff. But God, I'm behind on it, so I'm going to spend my time watching that instead of the time that I know. And again, I'm not saying TV is inherently bad until we begin to desire it more than we desire Him. God, I know that I haven't spent time with you in a solid week or a year. But you don't understand. There's so many good things to just let my mind look at. And, you gave people the idea of how to create it all. So in the end, didn't you kind of create the things that I'm looking at? See the justifications that we can come into? Paul actually writes to the church in Corinth in 1 Corinthians 6:12. He says, everything is permissible for me. Meaning, everything is permissible for me. But not everything is helpful. Everything is permissible for me, but I will not be brought under the control of anything. It's all permissible. But what happens when it begins to take control in our lives? What happens when it begins to take control in our lives is that we begin to look for our happiness in this. And it never follows through. We never get to that point where, we'll have some moments where we feel good. I mean, I know individuals who say, well, I drink so that I can let down my inhibitions and I can be who I really am, to which my thought is always, but if you have to use a substance to become who you really are, is that really who you are? Or are you just the boring person at the party? Like, maybe that's who you really are. And is that necessarily a bad thing if that's who God created you to be? The truth is, we all have addictions. I have them. And I'm not saying it like that, as in like it's no big deal because I have them. But we all have them. Just Tuesday night, as I was laying in bed, and my mind immediately, this is a problem that I have. This isn't an addiction that I have. It's just a problem that I have, and it probably comes from the amounts of caffeine that I drink in the afternoon sometimes. But I will lay my head down, ready to go to sleep, and immediately all the thoughts for the sermon start flooding into my head. It's a curse of being a pastor, that at the times that you want to sleep and the times that you want to relax, like that's when all of a sudden you're like, ooh, that would be really good to say on Sunday. God, thank you for that one. Now can I go to sleep? No, I've got this one for you too. But as I'm laying there, what I finally eventually did was I thought, you know what? I'm just going to turn my TV show on my iPad, right? This same iPad right here. I'm going to turn my TV show on my iPad so that I can just tune out and I can go to sleep. It's what I do a lot. In fact, I would say for a solid 3 or 4 years, it's what I did every single night so that my mind would shut down so that I could go to sleep. And it hit me in that moment on Tuesday night. Rather than going to God as I'm thinking these thoughts for a message on addiction and how we look to addiction to give us things, to give us happiness and joy and hope and love, to give us happiness, rather than go to Him and say, God, would you please help me calm my mind? My mind immediately went to, I'm going to turn on my TV show. And as my hand is reaching over to the iPad to turn it on, I went, no. What are you doing? You're literally thinking of thoughts for a message about this exact thing, and that's where you're going to go? You're going to go straight to an addiction to provide you with what you're telling people it can't provide. And so I laid there and I thought, okay, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be laying here for forever tonight. So I reasoned it out. I said, okay, God, here's the deal. I'm going to lay here for 10 minutes, and if you haven't helped me fall asleep in 10 minutes, I'm going to turn the show on. I'm going to take that as a sign that you're telling me it's okay to turn Psych on. Oh, I just gave away my show. That I'm going to turn on, yes, it's the TV show Psych. It's old. It's over. I've heard every episode probably 100 times at this point. And at the 10-minute mark, I reached over because I was still wide awake, and I reached over to turn it on, and it's like in my mind, it was just this, what are you doing? You limited God. How can you stand? And so I tell you that to say, church, I get it. On Tuesday night, I can say I finally fell asleep without turning the show on, but I'm going to confess to you, on Wednesday night, I turned the show on. And on Thursday night, I turned the show on. Some nights I don't. A lot of nights I do. It's an addiction that I know I have, and I'm telling you that right now for two reasons. One, to say I understand that when an addiction gets a hold of you, it is really hard to convince yourself and to make that choice to walk away from it and to say, no, God, I believe that you are the true source. And you can say it all day long, but to actually believe it and the fruit of our actions show it are something entirely different. So that's one reason I tell you that. The other one is I would actually ask you to pray that that would be an addiction that I can break. Because I know the research of how our sleep is not as good when there is a screen on when we fall asleep. I know it, but I justify my way out of it. And that's not the only one. Jesus told us that he is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. He is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. And I know that people will give us a lot of definitions as to what the good life looks like. My definition, it doesn't have to do with the people in my life. Oh, they make life better. But sometimes you don't have them. And there's got to still be a way for a good life without them. Because he says he's the way, the truth, and the life. And at the end of his life, everyone deserted him. They were all gone. The Word who became flesh and who made his residence among us ended his life with nobody by his side. And yet he still said that he was here to provide life, peace, hope, love, and joy. They are there from him. And we hear it every Christmas, that he is the reason for this season, and then we go on with our lives, and we leave this place, and we try and find it everywhere else. And we go through the rest of the year thinking that Christmas is just about the birth of Jesus, and we celebrate it like everybody else's birthday, and then we forget about it until the next year. And then we go back to our bigger houses, to our addictions. And at Christmas time, we tell ourselves, no, we're going to find it in him this year. And on December 26th, or December 25th, I should say, we open our presents and we look for it all there. Church, this Christmas, my prayer for all of us is that we wouldn't look for peace, hope, love, and joy, for happiness in the things that we're going to unwrap from a tree. That this year we wouldn't look for the escape from our families in the bottom of a bottle or on a screen in front of our faces, but that we would trust God, that we would understand that no matter how much they drive us crazy, and no matter how much we wish that we were somewhere else, that he has put us in that spot for a reason. That he has put us with those people for a reason. And instead of looking for the escape and looking for our happiness in something else, that we would be able to just be with him where he has taken us and where he has put us. Church, my prayer for this Christmas and this year is that we would truly look for our happiness, not in bigger houses, but that we would look for our happiness in the only one who can give it to us. In our pursuit of happiness this year, church, don't miss Jesus. Don't replace Jesus. God, we thank you for these many good things that you put in our life, and we know that there are so many. We live in a country of plenty. We live in a country that has distractions all around us, and many of them are good things. Or at the very least, they're neither good nor bad. But God, we also know that we are fighting a battle against an enemy that we can't see, and that enemy likes to convince us that these blessings that we have in our lives are actually the thing that are going to provide us with happiness that only you can give. God, it's been my prayer for a long time that in my own home, I wouldn't fall victim to those lies of the enemy. That as I buy gifts for my children, that I would understand that those gifts aren't going to bring my children true happiness. And that, God, I would be able to teach them in a way that they would understand that those gifts won't bring true happiness. God, as I open gifts myself, I pray that I would be able to understand that and believe that. And as I lay down tonight to go to sleep, God, I pray for the strength to push back against that which has taken hold of my life. God, as we depend on substances or people or vacations or gifts or whatever it may be, as we depend on those things to bring us happiness, remind us of the gift that you gave us, that began in a manger, and it went to the desert to run, and then it moved into a tiny town, eventually made its way to being homeless, to a cross, to a tomb, to a throne, so that we might have life. Amen.